Thank you. So yeah, we have a few minutes to host a bit of a Q&A session. Maybe Stephen, since you've spoken most far away from me, or least recently, I'll ask you the first question. Do you provide any support during project estimation stage for bidding stage support?
Yeah, at the sort of bidding stage, I think there's a few different stages where bidding would happen. There's maybe the building contract tender, where you're looking across the entire specification. And the important thing there is that you have a consistent specification for all bidders. And then that large specification would typically get broken down into smaller packages, as the main contractor then has individual tenders for the subcontractors. And again, it's vital that that large, rich database can then get split into the smaller databases that support the packages. And the truth of it at the moment is that's a very paper-based or a PDF-based process, where you'd be splitting the PDF up and giving it to the various tendering subcontractors. Whereas what we've actually got in the cloud is a very rich database. The whole building made up of the systems, made up of the products. And the truth is, I think at the moment, the technology and the software is ahead of the culture in the construction industry. And I think it's going to change rapidly now over the next 2 or 3 years.
Great, thank you. Brittanie, how do you roll out a schedule of installing IoT devices in case of brownfield projects or extension projects? Do you require advanced approvals to use IoT devices in restricted areas, especially if a project is in the middle of the city?
Yeah, I don't think I heard the last part of your question, but it looks like Abel's going to start answering that question to some degree. But
sorry, was it me? No. I just clicked as claimed. Yeah, but
oh, no worries.
No, so you now have to click. Yeah, so answer live, and then you can click second time, and it'll disappear. The question will disappear as answered.
Got it. Okay. I'll go ahead and just answer live here. I have to be honest. I'm not very familiar with rolling out device installations for brownfield projects specifically, because my realm is very specific to interior projects. Yes, they're essentially rolling out the installation, in my experience, has been more focused on tying it to the new install of the products and designing it into the building automation system primarily. So yes, there's a bunch of approvals that need to take place, especially with internal IT requirements for data and security, specifically internally to the company, because there's always a consideration of how that might tap into companies' networks, and there's always a consideration of just tampering. So that's something that usually has to go through a really considerable review by companies that are having the actual sensors designed and installed for the organization, depending upon what it actually is monitoring. So hopefully that helps. It doesn't specifically answer for brownfield, but hopefully that helps contextually.
Thank you. Stephen, does NBS provide expert witness in court cases for any dispute related with specs?
No, we don't. Our responsibility is to create a platform where the decisions are captured. But I think there's maybe two things that are worth mentioning here. When manufacturer product information is declared, it is the manufacturer that signs it off. So if a manufacturer says this particular cladding panel has the following fire rating certified, we don't go and do any certification or testing. We display the manufacturer's claims, and they're there, and the manufacturer signs those off. if there's a dispute further down the line on any specification decisions, that there are processes in place in the UK for arbitration under the various different contracts, whether it's JCT, NEC, etc. But again, we're just a vehicle to produce the specification. We don't certify or arbitrate against it.
And since I have you already speaking, if you have, there are a lot of questions to you as well. Which open source platform are you using to operate NBS, and how do you protect the NBS data from any fraud or data loss?
Yeah, it's a proprietary platform that we've written ourselves. So we do use obviously a development environment and some various components like Angular and the development platforms Node.js, and we make real use of the scalable AWS platform. But we have a security team internally. We have automated testing of our codes. We've paid third parties to come in and try and find any holes. But yes, it's not an open source platform. It's a platform our software developers, both in the northeast of England and in our partners in Poland, have developed.
So the second part was, how do you protect, what was it? How do you protect your data from fraud or data loss?
Yeah, it's through employing skilled people. So internally, we have a security testing team that keep up to date with the latest skills and trends, and we make sure that through our testing that the system's as tight as we possibly can make it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a very good way of securing things, I guess. I'll take a question from Dennis. Is it possible that we might end up with too many blockchain platforms that are essentially doing the same thing? How can companies share their blockchain developments more openly with other companies? Dennis, this is a very good question. I think that slowly we are seeing the natural kind of condensation, and some projects just joining forces together, some projects dying. If you see, for instance, what is happening between Hyperledger Besu, which is a consensus project that they contributed to us a while ago. It's an Ethereum permissioned blockchain, basically, which sounds exactly like Quorum. And Quorum recently acquired, and Consensus recently acquired Quorum. So there are some that speculate that this will slowly get merged into one. I don't know. I have no information it will be that way or not, but it kind of feels like these are the moves that that are happening. In Hyperledger, we are trying to keep all the blockchain frameworks that we have different enough that we can justify having them as separate projects. Unfortunately, there is still a lot of siloed thinking in the enterprise world, and instead of using the tried and tested platforms and adjusting them to your needs, people do quite often go with building something else something of their own. That is, that's a business decision that each company has to make for themselves. The important thing really is that you still have the ability to collaborate, right? Because if you have a blockchain where you're the only participant, then distributed ledgers don't necessarily make much sense. There are better ways of storing data, and that. There is a lot of discussion around what does it mean to interoperate between blockchains, and maybe we don't want to interoperate between blockchains. We just need to integrate, so have ledger communication rather than atomic swaps. I think that it is a very big threat. The market diversification in this case might be a big threat to the distributed ledger technologies as a whole. But as with most other technologies, 2 or 3 end up being the prevailing ones, and all the rest just slowly dies. So I think, if a history can teach us anything, it's that. And so I answered that.
So Marta, just a question about this, a question from myself. So is this then connected with a data schema or a data format or a data standard, or that diversity will carry on and eventually one standard will prevail?
Well, that diversity is the differences between different blockchains is on the consensus mechanism that they use, the programming language that they use, the approach to smart contracts, and do they have, do they use their own smart contract language or use basically Solidity, and the governance models. The governance is the biggest thing here, probably, because I think that consensus, with time, we will be able to swap out consensus as we wish, but the agreeing on the governance model and agreeing what kind of what happens, how does the ledger react to which situation, is something that is the most challenging thing. And I think that there is a lot of effort being put into standardization. I don't think that right now is the right moment to standardize. As a matter of fact, there has been the World Economic Forum, together with Global Business Blockchain Consortium, launched a project and released 2 days ago a little kind of one-pager saying that it's too early to write standards because there is too much diversity and we don't really know what is the right thing, right?
Yes, yeah. Interesting.
Stephen, do you believe that in the longer term, all these project value chains data should be stored on decentralized storage systems in order to comply with the blockchain philosophy of decentralization?
Yes. And I think what I'd say over the top of that is the challenge is how much of the information do you put in there to make it as efficient and as pragmatic as possible. So if you think of the greatest scale of thing, you could put the entire database in the blockchain, like gigabytes and gigabytes, but that's maybe not the best technical solution. So talking to some of the connections here on the CBC, where I believe the sweet spot is to have that sort of PDF record, which could be 300 pages of PDF, crunched up as a sort of a hashed version, so it's unique, so it's a small bit of data. And then on top of that, pick the top, say, 10 to 20 metadata fields, things like date, suitability, revision code, maybe a little bit further classifications and things. So you've got that right balance of what goes in that neutral external record. But I'm still learning. I want to know what's right for when we do it. But that's what I've been hearing, speaking to other people that have gone through this process.
Great, thank you. Brittanie, do you manufacture IoT devices in-house or you procure from other vendors? Can you name a few of the manufacturers?
Yeah, so no, I do not manufacture IoT devices personally. When I do work with different clients, I've worked with a number of clients who've rolled out sensor technology in their organizations. It really depends upon the use case. There are many different types of IoT applications. And so what will tend to take place is you'll try to find a technology, a specific software technology that ties to the particular sensor technology that you're trying to track. So what I find most people will do is look for the software that ties to the device. That's been my experience. However, developing sensors is really easy. I have a couple of friends who just like to develop IoT devices. And I think that's something that whatever it is, you just have to understand the engineering about it. Are you sensing, humidity for a particular space? Is it dust, right, for like a data center? They're going to be built differently based upon what your need is. Is it water flow? Is it airflow for your HVAC system? Plumbing, right? Like, is it temperature? So there are different companies that support different needs. If it's just simply like occupancy, there are a couple lighting manufacturers that maybe I can follow up and share with you on those lighting manufacturers that they literally just put the sensors in the overhead lighting in order to kind of just track where there's location management. But there's just so many specific needs where manufacturers will offer it within their technology and already have a software associated with the tech in order for you to monitor and do heat mapping and things like that. That's been my experience. There's too many manufacturers to really to name any, but what I do realize is that iOffice is one that they're focused on a software technology, but they work with a number of IoT manufacturers that they recommend for all types of sensing. So if you're going to do some research, I probably would personally start there. And then another one I would look up specifically for like HVAC integration. So like for your BAS, SenseWare is another opportunity to look into. So they're not manufacturers, but they can lead you there, depending on what you're looking for.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Stephen, should applications such as BIM run on decentralized computing systems?
Well, that's a tricky one because it depends how you define what BIM is. So I don't class BIM as a bit of software. I define BIM as the modeling process that you go through from planning a building all the way through to handing the information over. And there's probably 5, 6, 7, 8 bits of software that all play different parts, whether you're writing the specification, generating a 3D model, doing your costing, doing your planning, doing your tendering. So the question, can BIM run on an isolated process? BIM isn't a software. But then I think they need to ask, can the key decisions in those various software platforms be captured centrally? So that, I love the presentation, I think, was it from yourself, where you talked about the trust triangle between, say, client, consultant, and contractor, that there's trust that at this point in time, this is what was designed or specified or built, and that's securely accessed by any third party application 10, 20, 30 years from now. If that's how you define BIM, then it's an absolute yes. But if you're defining BIM as, say, Revit, then that's a bit of software, and it's a different question.
Right. Thank you. So that's the end of questions that we have. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to pop them in to the chat Q&A. Sorry, but if not, then I guess yeah, we're done.
Thank you so much for leading the discussion, Marta.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. I have so we have a little bit time for Q&A if anyone has any question. If not, then Leo, I have a very short closing announcements, mainly for next year, and then I will have this social networking call soon after that. I just wonder how easy it is to actually use this call, or I think the Zoom call itself, it's a little bit better, isn't it?
I think so, although we can, I mean, I'm very happy to promote all the attendees, the panelists. We can probably do it that way. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. Saves some
Yes, yeah. So see if there are any questions.
There's something in the chat box, maybe?
Yeah.
Was that already addressed? It's from Rahul.
There's one from Ben.
Yeah, should BIM applications become decentralized applications, like Revit became the app running on decentralized cloud?
Yeah, I think, Marta, you muted yourself, I think.
Well, I don't think that this is a question for me. I'm no BIM expert, to be honest. So I think it's Stephen's question.
Okay.
So I sort of tried to answer that earlier, but in terms of specifically Revit, so should Autodesk as a company embrace blockchain with Revit? I think there's opportunities there for the point where you issue things out of the model, whether that's an IFC file, whether that's a drawing sheet, whether that's a schedule. And I think increasingly over coming years, there'll be demand from client, designer, contractor to have that third-party record of this drawing sheet or this IFC model was issued out of a tool like Revit at this point in time. But in terms of should Revit just like be all in there, I think it's part of the issue process as opposed to the just generally I'm doing a design in blockchain something.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to that. So if you have a big Revit model, like a large project or a master plan or something like that, sometimes you click synchronize and you need to wait for 40 minutes. Yeah, and this is a centralized database, and this is a fairly well managed beautiful information model. It's just because it's too big. Now, if you put this in a distributed ledger or in a decentralized system, you probably will run into trouble very quickly. So, but there are opportunities there, like Stephen mentioned. You can use DLT or blockchain to point to data in a centralized database and help you to coordinate the project. I don't think you should put, Revit families in the blockchain or an entire project in the blockchain. I think this is as per the technology we have nowadays, this would be madness.
Abel, this was our first conversation when we met. It was at Autodesk University London last year. And I remember sitting with a cup of coffee and we had this discussion.
Yes.
Where do you sort of hit those issue points and push information into the blockchain? And it's fascinating.
We should think about, sorry, Brittanie, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I've been on my path of investigating what this looks like myself. And doing a number of podcast interviews, and one use case that I've been asking about is, a blockchain that just calls an external database, and I ran into one, and I don't know if it's going to work or not, if it's a possibility, but Flurry is one that I felt was a really interesting use case. It's really semantic graph databases that are, just really calling from a blockchain to a decentralized database, Amazon Web Server, right? It's not on the blockchain because it will slow it down. And, there are a number of companies who are actually analyzing ridiculous amounts of data, not necessarily design data, but as long as it's labeled, as long as it has really clear unique indicators for each type of data, it can be run as long as you know how to call it. Computer does what you tell it to do. But yeah, I support what both of you have said already. It doesn't make sense to slow down the process. Revit, right, itself, plus the process within blockchain transactions just takes too long.
Yes, and maybe there is a combination there. Maybe it's not you use blockchain for a few things and you use DLT for other things, and you use a centralized database for what it is good for. and it's a combined strategy. I can see blockchain being very useful to preserve as a kind of a digital preservation strategy. So you keep data that you need to keep for a long period of time, and you need to know it is the correct data. I think blockchain would be essential, would be really fantastic. Because as we've seen on Stephen's presentation, you know, some companies are here today, and a decade later they are gone. So, and where is the data you need that used to belong to that company, or that was managed by that company? You need to make sure that important data is available when you need it. In a blockchain that has this property of preserving data over a long period of time. Well, at least the idea is there. It's a new thing, but it's designed for that. There is I believe, a question.
Yeah, there's a question for me. If Hyperledger is able to interact with construction ERP tools like SAP or Oracle database used on live projects. So I am not sure is the answer. I think, Abel, you would be better suited to answer this question. In general, Hyperledger Hyperledger are frameworks and tools, as I said, on top of which you build things. Hyperledger Fabric is integrated with all major cloud service providers. So I can imagine that, yeah, the answer to that question is probably yes, if you build the system the correct way. But yeah, I don't have much experience with it.
Yes, I think my answer for this question, Saga, is that is the reverse. So because Hyperledger is an enterprise-grade framework for blockchain, collection of tools and technologies for blockchain, enterprise blockchain, people like SAP and Oracle will definitely be playing with the technology and implementing this in what they have. We had a very interesting interview with Oracle a few weeks ago. We're discussing how to collaborate with Oracle, and they have invested a lot in blockchain, developing blockchain capabilities internally. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are using Hyperledger frameworks and creating interoperability between Hyperledger tools and Hyperledger frameworks and what they do. I believe they do because when we did our hackathon at Arup, our construction blockchain hackathon using Hyperledger, the tutors were from Oracle. So
yeah. So Oracle is a long-standing, as is SAP, it's long-standing members of Hyperledger, and they have a lot of projects. And Oracle is offering blockchain as a service based on Hyperledger Fabric. So I would imagine that those two companies definitely integrate with Hyperledger. I don't know if they offer or what does an interaction between ERP tools and Hyperledger mean, really.
Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question, Saka. Okay. Okay, so there is a question.
There's a question for you as well. With respect to digital preservation, are there any good models out there to ensure the durability of ledgers? This would include funding guarantee over long term. I'm interested also in persistent identifier schemes in use or proposed here.
Okay, if there are like models out there to ensure durability of ledgers, I think like a blockchain itself, it's designed for that. Of course, we need to test in as many scenarios as you can possibly think about, but it is made to be, it's almost like a healing system. So if you remove a node and add another node, of course you can copy the ledger across. and you can restore that information. For example, if you put some data on a public blockchain, and for example, your computer explodes, and you go and get a new computer, you can download that ledger back to your computer, and you'll have all the data restored in your computer. So this is the principle. Now, you know, everything is okay until things are not okay. So we don't know the scenarios that, you know, a blockchain, we don't know all the scenarios that a blockchain can be corrupted to a point that you cannot recover the information. If anything, I think it's a very good digital preservation tool. Of course, you need to be careful with your keys, you know, don't lose your keys, etc. But there are many ways to set up your blockchain and exchange information. You don't have to have everything completely open and publicly accessible. You can add layers of privacy, etc. But I think it's a good strategy. So let's see.
What about using off-chain trusted computing like iExec?
Off-chain is I don't know much about it. So I believe, like in the construction industry, lots of platforms are based on centralized databases. Like lots of BIM solutions are based on centralized databases. And then you synchronize to your local devices, so you always have a local copy. But can you elaborate more on the trusted, on what you just mentioned? Sorry.
Leah, could we just make Ben a panelist so that he can ask questions with his mouth rather
Absolutely.
than with his fingers?
Sure. Ben, you're in room 101.
You need to unmute yourself, yeah?
Can smart contracts developed on Hyperledger administered fiat currency transactions into commercial bank accounts? Oh gosh, what do you mean by administer? You can use smart contracts to do bank reconciliation, so reconciliation between banks and settlements. You could use smart contracts to execute under given conditions. So say a contract between me and Abel that once, you know, I borrow money from Abel, and then the moment I get my paycheck, it gets returned to Abel or something like that. So yes, smart contracts could be used to manage fiat currency transactions. And Abel, I have some thoughts, experiences, opinions to using use of public multi-stakeholder token-funded chains for long-term preservation versus, for instance, funding dedicated digital memory institutions or industry consortia, such as International DOI Foundation. Maybe we could take this beyond the conference sessions in due course. That was a question from Martin.
Hello, Martin. Yeah, sure. If you're talking about digital object identifiers, etc. Yeah, very interested in all that. I think it can be tokenized. I have my prefix with a DOI.org, so I've acquired a prefix for my design computation input-output conference, because we are doing peer review and we're publishing. And I, being the control freak I am, I'm trying to manage everything. So I'm the editor, the printer, the distributor, and everything of the proceedings, and also the data online. And the DOIs are quite useful to to identify not only proceedings from conferences and books and things like that, but also data and other things. The thing is that when you have your prefix, you sign an agreement with DOI.org to maintain the persistence of the links they give you. So they give you a DOI code, and you have to link your data to the DOI database as someone who owns the prefix. So when you sign up with them to have this prefix, you also have this responsibility. And not only that, you have to make sure that all the references that are in your documents that are registered with DOI.org, you need to include them in the documents, even if the author did not include. So it cascades quite dramatically. You just subscribe to a lot of labor-intensive work, like labor-intensive maintenance for your identifiers. So if this could be automated, that would be fantastic. Because, for instance, this year we published 15 papers and 9 posters in our conference. And Design Computational Limited has to go and check every single paper or every single reference in every single paper and make sure that that reference has or has not a DOI. And if it has a DOI, I need to include the DOI in my database. So I think this is something that could definitely be automated. If we're talking about the build environment, then it goes crazy, right? The amount of information that you need to link, it's absolutely mental if you're talking about IoT, etc. So if you have some ideas about that, and if you want to discuss further, I'll be very interested.
I'll bring in Ben, who's managed to sign in with a different device, so he can elaborate on his question. Let me just see.
Hi guys.
Oh,
sorry,
hello.
Late connection. I wasn't ready for.
What happened there?
I was laying on the sofa with my iPad and the camera wasn't activated.
I see.
The microphone as well was not allowed. Anyway, so my question was regarding running heavy software application like Revit on a decentralized computing system like iExec, for example.
Mm-hmm. What is iExec?
iExec is off-chain trusted computing system. They've released a white paper like 2 years ago. It's a French company.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a decentralized cloud computing network.
Decentralized cloud computing. They're like one of the leading actors in Europe with that technology. And the idea is just to share the computing like tasks.
Yeah, for what I can see here, Ben, iExec runs on Ethereum. Yeah, so
no, it runs on Ethereum, like because it uses like Ethereum smart contracts to like organize the logic behind it, but the actual computing runs on computers, so peer-to-peer computers.
Okay, so I would say we're talking about the two very, very similar things. I think if it's running on Ethereum to compute things locally, maybe it's outsourcing or crowd or doing
That's
distributed
right.
computing, right, through the Ethereum blockchain. This is just a small step. If you're talking about digital preservation, that would be just a very small step to push that data into the Ethereum blockchain if you want to.
So it would only use Ethereum to delegate tasks, but the actual computing would run on the computer. So you could like probably run your Revit model on 20 different computers, and it would probably run more efficiently than on a single computer.
Yeah, I think this could be okay for something like. No, I'm not convinced, to be honest, because if you because you have the kind of PC over IP situation, when you or virtualization, when you virtualize, it can be using a supercomputer somewhere and then just send the pixels over the net to your screen, and then the Revit looks super fast. The Revit session looks super fast. So that is something people can do, but just the lag of the pixels on the screen make people seasick. It gives people nausea, the lack of feedback. I had this experience. I was setting up a kind of a PC of IP or a virtualized office in King's Cross for the Google headquarters here. We had to move the entire 3 different teams into one building to collaborate together. And we had to do it very quickly, and everything was kind of virtualized computing. So tiny little boxes in the screens, and we were just sending all the computer power there. And the people would have everything they need in a kind of a virtualized desktop. And it worked because the computers were just a few kilometers away. But if you want to do this with, we did the same. So there was a kind of redesign of the Geffen, what they used to be called the Lincoln Center, and I think now it's called Geffen in New York. We were setting up an office there to refurbish parts of that cultural center, and they were trying to broadcast to do a PC of IP and virtualize that office, and it worked terribly. It was horrendous because there was always a delay on the screen, simply because of speed of light. So if you're talking about something, virtualizing a Revit session when you're dealing with very big models, gigabytes, and then when you open like a 1 or 2 gigabytes model, Revit model in your machine, it becomes, I think, 7 to 10 times bigger. So it needs a lot of memory. I think to virtualize that using the Ethereum blockchain would not be a good idea. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's a good idea. It would be better to have a more powerful computer and run it locally on your workstation, and then synchronize the changes to the cloud, to the centralized database, somewhere to the federated model, the common data environment. But if you're talking about a kind of using this technique for something like BIM 360 or Bentley AI model, it probably would be useful. Yeah,
maybe with the 5G, like in a few years, people will be able to work with like smaller devices and delegate all the computing of the device and just have the display, and kind of contribute to like remote working and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, 5G is a wonderful idea, but you also apparently get a lot of interference because it's 5G, right? It's faster, but you get a lot of bad signal. So you need more antennas everywhere, etc. And I don't think a 5G is faster than a wired network, like optical fiber wired network. I think in terms of going back to your original question, I think digital preservation on the blockchain, very good idea, because that data is valuable over a very long period of time. We have buildings that they are designed to last 50, 60, 100 years. And we don't want to lose the information that we need to operate that building. And a blockchain seems to be a very good solution for that. But to decentralize things when you need maximum speed, as much speed as you can get, there are some concepts there. Maybe in the future, in the near future, BIM objects will be so smart that they will kind of a lot of the behavior of a BIM components in a project model will happen locally because the family knows what to do. And then you just send very small data packages over the blockchain. And that's a possibility, a little bit like video games. If you want to, in 3D games or in 3D virtual environments, if you want complex behaviors in a network game, in massive games with lots of people playing at the same time, what you have to do is you have the complex behavior programmed in the objects locally, And you just say, so instead of simulating an avatar walking and behaving complexly in a very complex way, you just say, go from A to B, and all the complex behavior is computed locally. Yeah, so that's a VR, like network VR technique or massive gain, network gain technique. And so we could perhaps use something like this in BIM. So the BIM objects become very, very smart, and you just send very small messages through the blockchain, or even a DLT, and this could be a way to operate. But I even that I'm a bit skeptical, because of the nature of the things we do in the built environment. But there are some techniques we can manipulate, techniques from the game industry that could be useful in the construction industry if we think that we should be using blockchain for real-time interaction.
Great, thank you very much. And
sure.
Yeah, just a very quick one before I leave. You mentioned when the building gets demolished. So once the building is demolished, what do we do with the data in the blockchain? The data relating to that building.
We learn it. We can use it for federated learning. Okay. We can use it for whatever we want. It's there for grabs, So you also, we're trying to walk away from this idea of demolishing buildings, if possible. The idea is to recycle it somehow, and reuse the components, and then blockchain becomes essential, because we're talking about preserving data over very long, very, very long periods of time, like hundreds of years.
Like material.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that question. Thank you.
And also, I mean, if you want to remove data off a blockchain, you just don't store it on the blockchain. You do the thing that I talked about with Joitsu, which is off-chain storage with using blockchain as a attestation to the provenance and authenticity of the data.
Yeah, so it's that matching the hashtag, if you like, to the originating data, right? Dennis, do you have a question?